All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our Leader Talk, L&D's role in building skills-based organizations, brought to you by Accredible Culture Partners, InfoPro Learning, The Regis Company, and Open Sesame. I'm Sarah Gallo, a senior editor here at Training Industry, and happy to be with you all today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items to help you get the most out of the program. So throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat, pop your comments in there, and submit your questions in the Q&A. All of your questions will be answered during the end of the session during the dedicated Q&A. Once this session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser. We love your feedback, so take a moment to share anything you'd like to with us about the session, speaker, content, anything else you'd like to share. All of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to those on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. We would also love to hear what you've learned today on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms. Now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next speakers. Carl Kapp is a professor of instructional technology at Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania, where he serves as director of the Institute for Interactive Technologies. Kevin Himmel is Chief Operating Officer of the Regis Company, where he leads operational and product strategy behind SimGate, a simulation-based skills practice platform built on the principle that completions don't prove readiness. And Ben Dyer leads learning, innovation, and design at Accenture, where he brings new capabilities and innovation culture to life across the firm's global learning ecosystem. So with that, I will have Kevin go ahead and take it away.
There we go. Thank you, Sarah. And let me go ahead and share screen. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited to have you here for this conversation. And before we get too formally in, I wanted to start by enrolling you in a conversation right away. And this is really about skills practice, this particular session, and we'll be talking about that quite a bit. But before we begin, think of one skill your company has invested in building this year. Think of one skill. And now picture the real moment at work when that skill just has to show up. And so if you've got that in your mind, go to chat and answer the question that's on the screen. Does your learning design put people inside that moment before that moment actually happens? And the bigger question here is why or why not? So as we're getting some responses, oh, thank you. Not seeing screen. How's that, everybody? Ben? Thank you.
I'm still seeing Sarah's screen.
That's a problem. Okay.
Kevin, for some reason, I can see your screen.
There we go.
Any better?
I've got it now.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Sorry about that. So the question to the group is in chat, does your learning design put people inside that moment before that moment actually happens? And more importantly, why or why not? So as responses are coming in, thank you for that. Not yet is actually a completely fair answer. Many organizations are investing heavily in skills, but the design still lives closer to content than to these things that we'll be talking about, practice, judgment, transfer today. So hopefully we see these responses coming in, and this is really the tension that Dr. Kopp and Ben and I will be talking about today overall. All right, so thank you for the responses. let's go ahead and move forward. We've already done some of the introductions. Just again, we're going to have Carl's learning design lens, which we're pleased to have, and welcome, Carl. Ben is going to provide us kind of that enterprise scale lens. And one practical question that's in front of us now is how do we make these skills show up when the work gets real? And so that question matters because skills gaps are no longer just an L&D concern. So, World Economic Forum recently reported that 63% of employers identify skill gaps as the top barrier to business transformation. So the question for L&D is not whether skills matter, it's whether our learning is actually building readiness for the work or simply creating more content around the work. And so, Carl, maybe just a quick first reaction here. When you hear that skills gaps are now the top barrier to transformation, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, well, I totally understand that. I think there's a lot of individuals who are in organizations who don't have the skills to keep up with what's happening. The speed of business, the speed of innovation has changed very much. And I think in some cases, employees have the skills, they just don't realize they have the skills. And in other cases, I think that gap is real and it needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. Interestingly, when I was just reading a study by Harvard, and they said that they were looking at skills, and they were looking at leadership skills specifically. Erwin, I think, had mentioned leadership skills. And they found that the top 5 motivators of looking for a leadership program is one was scalability, and then after that came content, came quality, came sustainability and measurement. So I think in some ways we're aware of the skills gap and we're very interested in what's happening. In some ways, we're missing the boat. Scalability for a leadership program is less important than the quality, I would argue. We need to do both simultaneously, but to put, I think, scale first kind of misses the boat a little bit, and sometimes that's the issue. But yeah, so very interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about scale, but first we're going to talk about kind of practice and design, and two things that I think are really close to all of our hearts here. So we'll go ahead and open up and want to hear from the audience on this call, and on the screen we'll go ahead and launch the first poll if we can. You'll see 4 challenges that we hear often from L&D teams. So take a moment and choose one that feels most true for you and your team right now. Is it, the skills not showing up in the work? Is it AI creating content, but not necessarily more capabilities? Practice work in pilots, but they're getting harder to scale, back to the scale, or providing impact in the way that the business will actually trust. So looks like we've got some responses coming in. Go ahead and we'll use this to kind of shape where we spend our time. And before we close the poll, as you're responding, notice what your answer might say about where your organization is in this journey. Some teams are trying to get skills closer to the work. Some are trying to avoid the AI content volume trap. Some are trying to scale practice. Some are being asked for a stronger evidence story. So we can go ahead and end the poll, and if you could share the results, that'd be helpful. Great. Thank you. So what stands out is that these are not separate problems, and they're really connected. Whether the challenge is this transfer, AI, scale, proof of impact, they're all pointing back to this question around how are we preparing people for real moments that the business actually cares about. So Ben, let me actually get your quick read on this and a quick reaction from your vantage point. From the work you're doing with learning teams and business leaders, which of these challenges feels most familiar to you right now?
Oh boy. I mean, I think people are right. A and D. It's fascinating to see that those are kind of in a runoff in this result, which I think is apt. I think they're both sort of fundamentally connected in a way, right? Like, what's the confidence level we have that when we give people skills, those skills are going to actually move KPIs and work? To know that that's going to happen, you've actually got this kind of chain of events that has to take place, right? And A is a part of that story because we need to know that when they have those skills, that they go back to the job and they actually use them. And there's a lot of reasons why that may or may not be happening. And then, of course, you also need to know that using those skills on the job actually does create business impact, right? And so it makes a lot of sense to be seeing those kinds of results here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, let's do one more quick poll here for the for our guests here today. So before we move into the main discussion, there are yep, there we go. AI is four different answers here. How has AI reshaped your design work? And so obviously there's lots going on. This will be pretty heated here. AI is changing the design conversation, but it's not always in the same way that it's changing it. So some of the teams, it's helping produce content faster. Others, it's improving scenarios and practice and personalization and learning paths. And for some of us, it's still like, hey, we're still figuring it out, and that's okay too. So take a moment, choose what feels most true for your team, and then we will show those results. And what we're watching for here is whether AI is mostly helping us move faster or whether it's helping us design better practice as well. So you can go ahead and share those poll results. Yeah, speed alone doesn't build capability. So go ahead and change that over if you can send that out. With the challenges that you named here, it looks like we're at 59% faster content production, but there's a lot, and I think we've chosen some multiple choices in here, which is good as well. But better scenarios and practice experiences near and dear to our heart, and many are still figuring it out, which again is okay. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and move forward and frame where we're going to be heading.
Kevin, I'm not sure the result popped up. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
I'm seeing it now.
Awesome. Yeah, there we go. We can leave that on the screen for a second, but I'm going to go ahead and just move us forward for time. So here is where we're heading. The broader conversation of today with training industry, what many sessions have focused on is about L&D's role in building skills-based organization. And our focus is going to be a little sharper. And the focus of this panel and for you as participants in it is more of a practical layer underneath that. So what has to happen for those skills to actually show up in work? And we're going to be focusing in on three different areas. First, practice as a unit. How do people build capability through application, decision-making, feedback? Second, design where it counts. So if AI is making content easier to produce, where should human design effort really go? And then the third is the scale practice to the work. So how do we expand readiness across roles, geographies without losing connection to the real work that people face? So that's the frame for our conversation. It's going to be around practice, design, scale. So we're going to jump right in to the first area of practice. And so in practice, if the goal is to get skill, exposure is clearly just not enough. Can't just have knowledge. People need a place to apply and practice that. They need to apply, they need to make decisions, they need to get feedback, they need to try it again. So Carl, we'll start with you. And the first question here is, what's a simple or the simplest test an L&D team can use to know whether a learning experience is actually building skills versus maybe just transferring information?
Yeah, so the question I like to ask is, what is the person going to do 10:15 a.m. tomorrow morning? Not what they're going to think, what they have to know, not what are they going to do? And your training should be centered around what they're doing. And we need to look at the task. We need to look at those elements. I think too often, if we even talk to a subject matter expert, they say, well, they have to know this, and they have to know that, and I know this, and that's why I do that. I don't care. I care about what is this person doing? Why are they doing it? I think Rumler or someone once said, inside every thick course, there's a thin job aid that's just dying to get out. What's the checklist that this person is doing so that they're actually being successful? How are we supporting them in that opportunity and in that practice? And I like to think a lot about practice. I often say that, Tom Brady, who was arguably the best football player that, ever lived, being a Steelers fan, I wasn't a fan of his for long, but it was okay when he went to Tampa Bay. But he practiced every day more than anyone else. And he knew football. It wasn't a matter of did he know it. It was doing it. In fact, at one point he even said, I like practice more than the games because that's what makes me better. And you talk to a salesperson and they go, yeah, I've been doing sales for 15 years. I don't need no training. Well, the question is it 15 years of experience or is it 1 year of experience 15 times? And I think that's the problem that we're having, is that people don't think about practicing the skills. I thought really so interesting. The survey, the first one said, making sure that we meet the needs of the C-suite, making sure that we have the information. Practice was such a small percentage in your poll. And then we got to the second poll. It said, AI is helping us do better practice and better. Is it? Are we doing the practice? Are we giving people immediate, constructive, deliberate feedback as they practice? That's what we need to do. That's what we need to think about. So to give a long answer to your question even longer, let's sum it up. What is that person doing tomorrow at 10:15 a.m. and are you supporting that activity?
I love it. It's really simple too, right? It's inspectable and you can do that. And so, Ben, I want to maybe flip it over to you. When you design a practice experience at Accenture, what are maybe some of the non-negotiable or things that have to be true, or perhaps the whole thing could fall apart?
Um, uh, this may just be a kind of a build on Carl's point, but I really do think that you've got to have meaningful, credible, context, rich, spaces for them to be practicing those skills that they've learned. What I think we're saying here, right, is that you don't just kind of learn it cognitively, right? You've actually got to have the disposition to and the practice to exercise those skills in noisy situations where you've got to make judgment calls. And the only way to practice that is in these kind of simulated experiences, these things that require you to make choices to, effectively do something that is as close as we can construct to what it would be like to do it out there in the world. And that gives you a chance to see results. It gives you a chance to demonstrate to yourself what some of the options are. I'm a big fan of like sandbox things and other kinds of experiences that don't have any one right answer. It's just whatever answer they come up with, you coach to that point, and you kind of start filling in people's sense of the terrain. So the stuff that's in my head when I think about what I want to make sure people are doing is really just, I want them to be kind of embedded in the closest thing that we can get to the real work so that they can practice all the parts of this. The cognitive part we're going to take care of. It's the non-cognitive parts. It's the parts that are in the deeper decisional parts of who we are that we need to test. What's your risk aversion like? What's your exploratory capability like, right? And you get into some really fascinating and deep psychology there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, I feel that like across our customers, I'm thinking about one example after hearing both of you. It's like it's less about how are we going to be building more learning. It's more about how are we creating more meaningful repetitions and getting close to the work. And that 10:15 in the morning comment that you made, Carl, about like what's inspectable inside of that is certainly there. So they need a safe place to practice those skills, but also not so safe that it's not their real world or their real environment, which we could talk about in a little bit. So, well, that's great. So that's a little bit about the practice environment, and where I think the question that a lot of folks are having, which I want to get into now, is talking a little bit about the role that AI can play to produce content so quickly, and talk a little bit about design. So, Carl, I'll start with you. AI can obviously create content almost instantly, but more content doesn't automatically create better performance. So how does this change where L&D teams should put their design hours and their effort, and maybe what should they stop doing first?
Yeah, so I stop creating content first is really what I think people should do. I think, I mean, if we think about what we really want people to do, is we want them to perform at a certain level. And so if we think of someone talked about dancing in the comments. If we think of music, we think whatever. How do they do that? Well, they practice under different scenarios, right? So getting back to Tom Brady, he practices in the snow, he practices in the rain, he practices in the sunshine, he practices in, why? Well, because he wants to know in every kind of environment, how do I react? And he doesn't want to have to think about reacting. He just wants to react. And there's been some really fascinating research in mathematics that show that people that can do division and multiplication faster are better at higher order math skills like trigonometry and those kind of things. And the belief is because that you're not spending as much cognitive overhead trying to figure out addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and figuring out sines and cosines and all that kind of stuff. And so the speed needs to be built in a way of helping with fundamentals. So when we think about what we want somebody to do, we need to break it down into the fundamentals. And how do we do that? I think we need to go back to task analysis. Task analysis is something that we, as a field, have done for a long time, and then we kind of forgot about it, and now we got to get back into it. So what each task do we need to be doing? So that becomes really, really an important element of that. The other thing about design is content does not teach. That's why we have this field called instructional design, where we actually design the content, or design the experience, not the content. We design the experience to lead to learning. So someone had mentioned, Jamie had mentioned interleaving, right? That's an instructional strategy, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of this instead of mass practice. That works really effectively. We know that when we teach somebody a concept, we should give them examples and non-examples. We know that when we do training in terms of problem solving, we have to give problems of a different variety. We can't just show the same problem every single time, right? That's getting kind of back to interleaving. So the idea is that we really need to get back to designing the instruction, not just throwing out content, because people can get content anywhere. They can't get focused, quiet, purposeful practice, and that's what we need.
Yeah. And, we spend our days thinking about how to build simulations, Carl, with SimGate. But I'm also curious back to the task analysis side of it. Why did it kind of fall out of touch with a lot of instructional designers? And how fast is AI either helping or hurting that particular task to get back to it?
Right. So I think what happened was everybody got to the point where we have to do things at speed, right? Yeah. And so doing things at speed meant that we couldn't take the time to do the task analysis, and it wasn't life and death anyway, right? They still do task analysis if you're going to fly 747 or something like that. You have to know what everything works. The military still does it, right? Life and death companies still do the task analysis. What do you have to do? That kind of stuff. What doesn't happen is the idea of breaking down, like, what's the sales process, right? Or what's my process for dealing with a customer? Or what should I do first in terms of analysis of a claim? What do I do for, like that just kind of went away. Well, if you just know about the product, you can sell the product, right? Oh, and by the way, here's the sales model that looks like every other sales model, and just go do it, right? Not applying that and practicing that is a problem. And now that we have AI, where we have agents, and agents perform tasks, so we're starting to say, and I think this is where L&D can add a lot of value, is let's look at the tasks that everybody does and figure out, is that an AI task or is that a human task? Or more likely, is it a mix of those two tasks? And then how do we train for both the AI to do that, for us to do that, and for us to do that together with the AI? Training people, give people the capacity to think about work as tasks and elements at one level. And then, so I want to be a dichotomy here. At the other level, we have to think about, how do we help people make better judgments, better problem solving, better critical thinking? So I think we have these this dichotomy going on. Two dichotomies is repetition. We have this dichotomy going on in that at one level, we've got to problem solve, connect dots, actually step back and think through what's happening. At the other level, we've got to make sure that the tasks that we want people to do or agents to do are the right tasks. I always heard this thing that ISO 9000 was certification, right? If you followed all the steps of ISO 9000 as you have them written, you could get certified. Well, that means that you could create a life preserver out of cement and still get certified, right? I mean, you follow the procedure, but it's not doing anybody any good. In fact, it's harmful. And we have to train ourselves not to do harm. And that's why we need to know about those tasks. That's why we also need to know about the judgment and the critical thinking.
Yeah, great. All right. So, Ben, I think this is the perfect time. I want to bring in your horse-drawn thinking framing that you did at a presentation earlier this year. And you can explain it a little bit, but the idea is that sometimes we bolt new technology onto old training models and we call it innovation. So, when you talk about horse-drawn thinking in L&D, what does it actually look like in design?
Yeah, I mean, so the metaphor here, right, was that you know, you think about what the first cars looked like, and they really looked like horse-drawn carriages. What people did was they took single cylinder engines. The first car that I know about is a one cylinder engine. It's got like 1.1 horsepower. If you look at the actual thing itself, it looks like it is it's like a horse carriage essentially, but they've got kind of this hood on one side of it, and right underneath is this engine. And you go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look anything like a car. Why would they think that's how that's supposed to be, right? And that's because that's what their paradigm for passenger transport looks like. And so you think about it, all of the things that shaped what makes the current appearance and style and build and all the things that makes your car look like your car now, that stuff didn't exist back then. You don't need, essentially an aerodynamic frame for a vehicle that's not going to propel you faster than about 10 miles an hour, you know? But we do now because our cars go faster than that. And you don't need all the safety gear therefore, because if the thing crashes, you just stand up and walk out and get on your way again, So similarly, we have this transformative new technology now, and we're bolting it onto existing processes, existing ways of thinking, existing problems we're trying to solve. And so now I think that the trick for us, the challenge for us is, can we think about what the world's going to look like when this capability is fully realized? Like, what kinds of problems are we not going to have to solve anymore? What kinds of problems are we going to see emerge because of this technology? What kinds of values are we going to see emerge? One of the most fascinating things I think you can do is kind of study the history of technology. I was just watching a BBC segment from 1979 yesterday on, this is what the world of the future looks like now that we've got computers that can do word processing, that can actually produce documents, and these people are thinking a gazillion different thoughts about the way the future is going to go. It turns out, you guys, it might be possible to work in your home, right? So really fascinating stuff there. And so, we've got to start thinking through that stuff. And I think one of the best things to do is to really kind of zero base, go back to task analysis, go back to kind of analyzing the basic problems you're trying to solve, and then really think about it as a designer. Think about it from a very creative blue sky point of view and go, what do I really actually need here? And see if you can be like those people who said, how about we stop trying to design a better CD player and we just start thinking about how to design a way for people to listen to music. And that's how we started getting iPods and things like that.
Yeah. So Ben, when you think about maybe somebody comes to you at Accenture and they say, I've got all these amazing tools now, where should I be spending my time as a designer? What's your answer to them?
Developing taste.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the things that we as humans are going to continue to do, because we're the only ones that can be held accountable to do it, is we've got to be the ones who are identifying what it is that good looks like. And so that analysis is going to be really, it's our ability to pick out value. And it's hard to kind of describe simply. I'm probably going to think of 10 ways to do it after I get out of this call. But the key idea is, what are people going to buy? What is it your stakeholders want? When AI produces all the things it can produce, you're the one that's going to be on the hook to say, well, no, that thing there, or those couple of things over there, that's the stuff that we want to pay attention to and go for. So I think the taste pieces is important. And I think that's grounded in your industry knowledge of whatever industry you're in, whatever you're training. I think it's also grounded in all of the kind of expertise that Carl and others are going to talk about in terms of what great learning looks like. And when you can find a way to put those together, you're going to then know how to sort the wheat from the chaff and what the AI brings you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, well, let's in the interest of time, let's move from where designers spending their effort to how organizations scale, and how they can scale kind of this practice without losing quality. So, Ben, we'll just stay with you. I think, you design immersive practice across a workforce that's 750,000 people, 120 countries. When you think about the discipline that lets immersive practice hold up at that scale, what are you thinking about, and what tends to kind of break first?
Huh. What what breaks first? Things I'm thinking about. Obviously, if you're working in a global organization, you've got to be very attuned to the variations in the way that work gets done and the various cultural differences that are happening around the world. That becomes a big part of what we do. Um, the ability to measure what we do and the way that we manage data. I think if you've worked in a global setting, you probably know that there's different rules in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, I should say. So I think you've got to be thinking about a lot of things that have to do with data, measurement, cultural differences. The systems themselves are, um, when the way that you deliver that stuff is all, you know, depending on what kind of thing you're delivering, that may be easier or harder. I don't think it's that hard to make a URL available to people in other places in the world. But when you're doing that stuff at scale, you need robust systems. You need to know what to expect, I think, from large programs. There's a little bit of a sociological component. We have 784,000 employees last I checked. And if you say to yourself, well, I'm going to make sure every one of those 784,000 employees goes through my program, I'm here to tell you, not even the legally required ethics and compliance training. I'm sure it is for legal purposes. Everybody gets through it, but like we have to like chase people for that stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like there's very little that you can get everybody to do. So part of it is you've got to kind of work the percentages. You've got to like really, um, you know, pay attention to how people are processing it. You've got to look at attrition. So there's a whole sort of large group analysis set of tools that go with that too.
Makes sense. So, Carl, bringing you in on this idea of scale more from the learning design, and maybe the risk around learning design here. Scaling can make things more efficient, but it can also kind of flatten out the experience. We've seen that with, just traditional e-learning over the years. What do we need to kind of guard or protect against if we're not careful here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the things that AI does for us now, and we've been talking about this as a training industry forever, personalized learning. I always say that we took the worst of classroom training and we automated it. So we broadcast the same stuff to everybody. But now I think we can solve this two sigma problem. And the two sigma problem is that Bloom did a study, same guy that did the same group that did a taxonomy. Bloom just put his name on it, but everybody else did the work. But anyway, so the Bloom taxonomy and the Bloom two sigma problem, the two sigma problem addresses this, which is research shows that in a classroom setting, people did two standard deviations of less, not as well as when they were tutored. So the tutor, and this is intuitive, right? The tutors, if you had a tutor, you did better on the tests and exams and all that kind of stuff. And if we go back to probably the best learning model, it's the journeyman apprenticeship model, right? That was a great model. It was one-on-one. If Carl messed up, Carl got Carl's specific feedback about how to hit the horseshoe, and he didn't do it again because he got yelled at. Or if Carl was having a bad day, the mentor would know that was perfect, right? So now we have the ability to go ahead and scale that. And we know from the research about deliberate practice that the feedback when you're doing something needs to be specific, critical, and timely. So if we can create specific, critical, timely feedback as I'm practicing a skill, I'm going to get better and better at that skill. AI can do that. It has infinite patience. Now, AI should be, they always talk about this, but it should be in the loop. It's a continuum, right? I can practice some leadership skills with AI, but I will never be an effective leader unless I actually lead real people. So we need to think of this as the flight simulator, right? Your pilot doesn't go from flight simulator to flying your airplane right away, right? There are intermediate steps. They become a co-pilot and they figure out how to do that as a co-pilot. And then they go through that process and all that kind of stuff. Same thing in business. I remember when I was graduating from college, we put the oil lights on and, we did all that stuff. When students were recruited into the big accounting firms, they actually would spend 3 months in operations, 3 months in marketing, 3 months in training, 3 months they would do a rotation. That's kind of gone now. And so you are not getting that wisdom of the organization. Yeah. You're being this myopic focus. And so in some ways, I mean, it's such a dichotomy. In some ways, this myopic focus where you're giving Carl specific actionable feedback is fantastic. In other ways, who's looking up and saying, hey, Carl, stop building this fantastic cement life preserver, right? We got to step back. So that's really kind of, I think, an interesting situation of where we are. Yeah, we have to teach these skills. Yeah, we have to get people skill ready, but are we teaching them the right skills? Then are we teaching, to Ben's point, future skills, right? Are we helping people across the globe, or are we focusing in on just these immediate today set of skills? And the other problem is that, we're incentivized to do the immediate today set of skills. Like, oh, we need this for tomorrow. We need this. Okay. Well, what about 6 months from now? Well, we'll worry about that 6 months. And next thing you know, it's 6 months from now, and we don't have these skills. Let's do this massive skill training, and then you do that, and then so it really is a little bit of a lack of like long-term thinking and planning, because we're all focused on the moment. Like, how do we do this? And that's why capacity building is important, and that's also why giving people time to train, not for a specific task, but build up your leadership skills in general, build up your negotiation skills in general, build up your presentation skills in general. Then when the time comes, you've got them. You're not going from ground zero to 180 miles an hour.
Yeah, it reminds me of, we recently worked with a global consulting practice. They were bringing on a whole bunch of new consultants into the business. Obviously, these folks were super smart, very motivated, but they were stepping into client situations, and knowledge alone wasn't enough. And they had to get in and they have to practice those skills. And so they looked across a half dozen or so skills, and that was really it. It's like exactly what you're saying, Carl, is like, can they show their readiness and the skills readiness in order to go do that job back on? And so obviously that was about scale. Trying to do that across 50,000 people or so is quite different, but you can also break it down to that unit of practice. So, all right. Well, it looks like we're running short on time. I just want to kind of pull in Lance here from our team. He's been monitoring the chat throughout. In our few final minutes, we'll go ahead and do our best to take on any question and answers. And while we're on the Q&A, you'll also see a QR code on the screen. If this conversation raised questions for you or your organization, especially around the idea of practicing skills, skills readiness, AI-enabled design, we're happy to continue the conversation. Just go ahead and click on that QR code, and we'd be happy to reach out to you. So go ahead, Lance, if you want to queue up any questions for the panel here.
Sure. First one here. You change one thing about how organizations think about the relationship between training and performance. What would that be? Ben wants that one.
Just the training automatically leads to performance, right? It's got to be a certain kind of training. And even then, you've got to have other factors in play in the organization, things that like you can't train somebody, even giving them the very best kind of skills practice that you might have. And then they go back to their job and it turns out their manager doesn't support the new way of working, or they've got incentives that actually countermand that training and incentivize them to do some other thing, whether that's punishments or rewards or whatever it might be. So, there's a lot of stuff that's got to happen right when they get back to the job as well. So all of that stuff is a part of that story.
Yeah, I think, what was the question? One word? Is that all we got? Or
if you could change one thing about how organizations think about the relationship.
So the other thing that I think, and I think this is a problem in education as well as organizations, is that we are we are training people like liberal arts, for example, trains people for uncertainty, trains people for the connections that Ben was talking about, trains people for relationships. We're not doing that anymore. You're going to college so you can get a job, right? And guess what? That job's not going to be here 5 years from now. But you train for it and you spend $60,000, $80,000. Like, so organizations are the same way. We're going to train you on this new order entry system. Well, why? Well, because that's what we have. We have to do order entry really quickly. 6 months from now, we might not do order entry. We might have the client do it, the customer do it themselves. So we're not training in any, we talk about skills and all that kind of stuff, but we're not training in any capacity. Where's the 3-day leadership training, right? That's gone. Where's so all of this speed to market and AI is going to do things faster and AI is going to think for us leaves us, if we don't step back and look at the bigger picture, out of the bigger picture. So I used to say, like, when video came along, I would say, if you're an instructor that can be replaced by a video, then you probably should be. If you're an employee that can be replaced by AI, maybe you should be, right? Maybe we should step back and say, what can I do in terms of judgment, in terms of problem solving, in terms of organizational excellence that other things can't?
Perfect. Question for Carl here. What's the design decision you see teams struggle with the most, the one that determines whether a skill actually transfers?
Building, I would go back to building in the practice, right? So I'm a big proponent of action first learning, which let's have the learners do something first. Too often we present learners with like objectives, and I call those objections, right? Today they're going to learn 3 ways to close a sale. A good salesperson goes, I know 5. What a waste of time, right? So all of a sudden they're objecting to your training, right? But what if you said, do you know the number 1 way a sales are closed in this organization? Oh, maybe. Now you have my attention, right? And now let's practice that number 1 way, right? So that you can apply it, and then come back and give us feedback on how you did. So I think practice is the element there.
Perfect. Okay, one last one. Do we have enough time?
I think we got a minute. Yep.
All right. So where do most design teams spend their time today versus where they should be spending it now that we have AI?
Ben, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I want the language again. Can you just give it to me again?
Where do most design teams spend their time currently? And where should they be spending it? Now that we have AI, that's going to help offload a lot of these tasks. Where should they be spending their time?
It's a great question. I think right now, where I'm spending a lot of my time is in not getting it to write things in response to a prompt, but getting it to help me think of 10 ideas. And then I choose the stuff I want. And then I get it to think of like 10 different, formats for the stuff I might want to do. And there's this really interesting recursive relationship you can have where you're getting AI to essentially be your quick paid intern a little bit. And then you can start to generate concepts and ideas. And that's when your judgment and your taste come into the picture. You can start making choices. And then what's fun too is I think when you get AI to kind of help you build things with AI. So if you need an agent for something, getting the agent to draft instructions that are interpreted based on what you told it. So I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do when you start getting recursive like that, and use it more as a partner than as a production output thing.
Perfect.
I'd be curious for Carl's thought here too. Carl, what's your
Yeah.
go-to AI, your killer app?
So I mean, I'm using Claude a lot now, but I totally a conversation. It's my tutor, right? It's my conversation. So I had to make a chatbot the other day and put in some instructions. And then when something didn't work, I took the screen capture and I said, "What's up with this?" And I said, "Oh, you should do this." "Oh, okay, good." Right. So it even when it messed up, because it does still mess up. Like, let's not blindly pledge allegiance to AI just yet. But like one time it put this banner on the webpage, and I'm like, "Why'd you do that?" And he goes, "Oh, well, I just wanted you to know that it was working." So I'm like, "I don't care." So having that kind of conversation and using it as a tutor is what I've been doing, and I find it really effective in terms of cutting my learning time. But again, you have to know what questions to ask. You have to know what capabilities to do. No one's asking me. I'm not paid to make chatbots, right? So I'm building capacity, and that's, I think, what everybody needs to do. And then the other thing, just about design, like go back to your design roots, everyone, and look at instructional strategies, look at task analysis, look at the basics, the blocking and tackling, because that's going to be hugely important going forward when content is just thrown out there.
Perfect. Well, hey, before we let Sarah take it back over here, Ben, Carl, thank you so much. Lance, thanks for pitching in with the questions, and the audience. We just really appreciate your time and look forward to continuing the conversation. Sarah, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Yes, thanks everyone. That was a great discussion. Lots of awesome engagement in the chat as well. We will be taking another 15-minute break, but up next we have Liza and Paige for their session sponsored by Open Sesame, Building a Skills-Based Advantage in the Age of AI. I hope you all will stick around for that next session, which will be beginning at the top of the hour.